My name is Taylor Helms, and I'm the Director of Operations, and I'm on the French horn, piano, and composition faculty at Z-Tunes Music School in Atlanta. And I'm super excited to host these clinics and today to welcome Atlanta Symphony Orchestra violinist Dae Hee Ahn as our clinician today. People still filing into the waiting room. Miss Ahn
Mhm.
joined the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra May of this year. She's a multi-talented musician who has appeared on stages across the United States and South Korea as a soloist, chamber musician, and an orchestral player. Um, Before joining the Atlanta Symphony, she was a member of the New Haven Symphony and has served as a
Mhm.
rotating concertmaster of the Yale Philharmonia. For today's clinic, we will stay on mute while Miss Ahn works through the GMEA like 1112, I think. Yeah, 1112 violin audition excerpt. So I suggest that you have a copy of your excerpts nearby with a pencil, because I'm sure she's going to have tons of notes for you. And if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat box. And once she's finished with her presentation and her performance and everything, we'll go through the questions and I'll read them out to her so she can answer them for you. So just make sure that you
Mhm.
type them into the chat if you want to ask her anything. And without further ado, I'll hand it off to you, Miss An.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to share this excerpt with great students. Um, so I think I will go ahead and actually just play through the excerpt and then give some practice points on how to prepare for the audition, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so this was the excerpt from Mazas, from what I believe. And so when I reviewed the criterias, if I saw that there were three categories that one must show, and the first category was the tone quality and the musical effect. The second category was the intonation, and the third category was the rhythmic accuracy and the tempo. So when I look at a piece that I work for the first time, the first thing that I like to do is, if there is a recording, then listen through it so that I get a sense of what the music is like. But in this case, because it's an etude, and usually there are not that many recordings of an etude, my first approach was actually figure out what is there for me to work on. So I can, from a glimpse, I saw that this etude was more about having a good beginning at the first note with a pedal tone, so that all the entire piece is there's a pedal tone up and then the beginning changing notes. So that's the first thing I noticed, and I started from there. And afterwards, what I wanted to basically what I need to know is what are the challenges that I'm going to be facing when I'm working on this. So some of the challenges that I saw was that there are shiftings. For example, measure 3, we are in first position for the first 2 measures, and then we go to second position. So I noted that. And then measure 5, we go back to the first position after. And then we stretch with the 4th finger. And after that, we go on back to second position. And then first position and stretch. Second position. So these are the things that I noted quickly. So I guess I should talk about the categories. I think the easiest place to start is actually the intonation. And luckily, this etude is very simple for us to talk about the intonation because we can practice it in chords. It's so perfect to practice this in chords. For example, instead of breaking the notes, I can play them together. And the first 2 measures is basically a D minor chord. And then the second, this is a G minor chord. So things like this, I can definitely work on intonation if I know what I'm playing. If I am to go on and maybe we can jump to 4, 5, 5th line, or 5th measure of the 5th line, then again, I'm thinking in chords and practicing the intonation that way. So we're in second position, and this is a B flat major chord. And this is an F major chord. We go a C minor chord and G minor chord. So this etude is really nice to work on intonation because not all the time, but most of the time, every 2 measure highlights a certain chord, and you can definitely practice it in a chordal way. One thing as I was practicing for that, one thing that I did with my left hand that can also help with intonation is that I move in groups. So instead of playing 1 note at a time, let me show you, I don't know if everybody can see. Let me show you, I guess, not a good way to play. I'm kind of exaggerating to make a point, but if you can see, I'm thinking in 1 note at a time and my fingers are kind of like jerky and I'm not really preparing in advance. But if I look at the first 2 measures collectively, then I'm going to set a position in my left hand where I am actually just in this 1 position, and that will definitely help with the secure intonation. And same thing if I move on to third measure, I'm not going to be doing, again, I'm kind of exaggerating, but I'm not going to be thinking in 1 note at a time because that's going to definitely alter my intonation. Instead, I'm going to have my hand set in this position and you can figure this out very slowly, measure by measure, or two measures at a time, then you're really doing well for the intonation work. So let me just take a look at some notes that I jotted. Yes. So I think that's pretty much it for the intonation part. Again, to highlight what I said, notice where the shifts are and think in terms of chords. Know what chord you're playing so that when you hold the notes together, then you can actually tune your notes to that certain chord. And when you're playing, keep your left hand more in like a hand form that's grouped together instead of one single note at a time. So those three things would be key to making the intonation section really secure. Okay, so if we are to move on to the second section, the rhythmic accuracy and tempo. Basically, I think it says the quarter note should equal 88. That's not a fast tempo or a slow tempo. I think it's a moderate tempo, which is perfect for this etude. In this tempo, it seems easiest for me to kind of play at this section of the bow instead of here, lower part. For example, if it was a faster excerpt, it would be much easier for me to do it in the lower section because we would have to bounce it that way. But this is not a fast excerpt, and it's very hard for me to play here in a slow tempo. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to kind of think about the middle to the upper half. So we see that there are forzandos, written out forzandos for every changing note. And what you can do is you can practice this in a martelé, which grabs a string with the index finger and quickly releases. So that way you can get a really good articulation, and you can also control your tempo pretty well if you use your index finger in the beginning changing notes. Also, I like to think of the changing notes as more important, and that's probably why there is a written forzando on it. Although there are 3 notes per beat, I would actually put the emphasis on the beginning, and then the 2 Ds. It's just kind of, you know, it just completes the chord. It's not really important. So I wouldn't practice like where I equally emphasize every note. More so. More like this. And I guess that would kind of go into the musical effect category of playing. But going back to the rhythmic accuracy and tempo, you can work with your metronome, and 88 is what I have. But if that seems too fast for you, then pull it down to 60 as an example and work at it at 60. And if it gets better, I like to tell my students to always go at an increment of 4 so that you can do 64, 68, 72 until you can reach 88 in a very comfortable way. Okay, what else can I say about the rhythmic accuracy and tempo? While you work with the metronome, you will notice that I noticed when I was working with the metronome that sometimes it's going to be really hard to be very strict to the metronome because metronome doesn't tell you what the music is about. And I guess this goes to the first category of tone quality and musical effect. So I was really happy when I saw this category because this part gives you a little bit of a flexibility to make your own decisions regarding where do you want to kind of slow down or pull back, or where do you want to move forward. So these things, we can definitely make the decision, but the music does tell us clues as to what we should do. For example, why don't we try analyzing what's in the music by looking at the different harmonies and where it repeats and where things are moving quickly harmonically. So if we take a look at the first two lines. Up to here is basically one phrase. You know, it's a one statement. And I'm playing at a faster tempo than notated so that I can quickly show you guys what's happening. But that was one statement. And the second statement starts similarly as the beginning. It changes here. All the way to here. That was a longer statement. And within this long statement, there were smaller sections that kind of harmonically seem important. For example, if we go back to the beginning of the second statement, which is on line 2, second to last measure of line 2. So that's D minor for the first two measures, and then G minor for the next two measures. And we go into a major. This is the C major, and then F major. Again, F major, and then back to D major and D minor, and then this is still D minor, and then honestly, I would have expected a dominant chord in the D minor, which is A. That would kind of, you know, be what I'm expecting harmonically. But something different comes. A B flat major. So that's a surprise. So maybe I would bring that out, you know, play that a little bit more because that's a surprise harmonically. So we arrive at a key, a B flat major. Now, section 3, the third statement starts here. And I would call this like the developing section of the etude because it doesn't settle in one key. It just constantly goes in circle of fifths. So we start in B flat major for two measures. We go to F major. We go to C minor. We go to G minor. And these are all related in fifths. D minor, A minor, and then we go back to D minor. What you notice is that instead of two measures now, when we go back to D minor over there, it's every single measure. There is a harmonic change. So something is happening. And that tells me that, oh, that means maybe we're heading back to home. Home meaning the beginning statement. Maybe this is where the climax is. So these things, you can make the decision, but ultimately, what I would do is probably make a crescendo all the way through that harmonic change, which was, I lost my place, but all the way to here, which I think is the climax. I would make that my goal of that phrase, this long third statement. And finally, the fourth statement is on the last 3 lines. we arrived at some kind of a finish, I would say this would be the final draw of this etude. So if you noticed where we arrived, this is measure 3 of the second to last line of this excerpt. Starting from there all the way to the end, the harmony doesn't change. It's just constantly D minor, D minor, D minor in different form, different octave. So that I would say is basically, it determines that we are heading to the end of the piece, right? So until there, I would constantly go maybe make a crescendo, and starting from there, that's basically the coda of the piece where it doesn't change. It's just what it is. It's a statement that we are reaching the end. So I kind of added my own retardando, just a very little one when I make the arpeggio up. That's my way of interpreting it. You can do the opposite and kind of end strong. There's different interpretation, but this was basically the structure, what's happening in the harmony, and to review the things that I went through, we basically have 4 big chunks, and the first 2 kind of is, I would say, the first half of like the exposition of the piece, and then when we get to line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth line, last 2 measures, that would be where the circle of fifths happen. So that's kind of the middle developmental section of the piece. And finally, when we get to the last 3 lines, I think we're heading to the end of the piece. And when we reach that D, repetitious D minor chords on the last 2 lines, that's when I would say we're heading to the finish line. So hopefully that would help you make your own decisions dynamically. And after you work with the metronome and you really nail down all of the intonation and all of the shiftings and every, bit of information that needs practice, after that, then I would incorporate this musical, interpretation, and kind of feel free to grow and increase in, I guess, excitement at some of the parts, which means that you might not be metronomically exactly there, but still within that frame of 88 equals quarter note, so that we don't go crazy. But you can definitely have that freedom once everything is mastered. So I think that's basically what I have to say with this etude. And how are we doing on time?
We're doing great. We're doing great. We have plenty of time. Just maybe
Yeah.
a couple minutes for questions. If you guys have anything to ask about the etude, or just maybe in
Mm-hmm.
general preparation for the audition
Yeah.
recording, just type them into the chat. We did have one question,
Mm-hmm.
but that was kind of answered. But somebody asked like that their teachers told them that they were supposed to play it at 96, but
Oh,
we cleared it
I
up.
see.
It's marked at 88 on the sheet. Well, I have a
Mm-hmm.
question kind of thinking about that. I know what I would tell my students, but I'm curious. I don't know. I'm not sure about
Mm-hmm.
violin world. Um, if a student did play it faster at 96, would that be like, would you take off points because they were going too fast? Is that a thing?
Well, I mean, nobody. Well, I guess because there's only one excerpt and everybody's going to be playing the same thing, like the listener would definitely know what 88 would be like. And if it's too far away from 88, like it's obvious.
Mhm.
But if the student has a mas- complete mastery of the technique, and it makes total musical sense and it's very personal interpretation, then I don't think I would take off points for playing it faster.
Okay,
But if the student chooses a faster tempo and is kind of out of control, then definitely doesn't show, yeah, that
gotcha.
the
Yeah,
student was following the rules. Yeah.
That's what I yeah, that's what I was thinking
Hmm.
like it probably better to play slower and in tune with good tone and all that.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, so we have another question. Someone
Hmm.
Camille asks, any advice on the super speedy string crossings?
Oh, that's a really good question. I was actually thinking about that when I was working. So I noticed that the third to the end, third line to the end, that's a very difficult section because we're string crossing at a tempo that's kind of hard to string cross that fast. So what I would do is I would actually practice this out of not out of rhythm, but not exactly as written. So I would actually work on the string crossing. So let me show you. So instead of actually playing every note, I would focus on the actual string crossing and then prepare for the next one. Prepare for the next one. And something about string crossing is that it's really important for your left hand to be already prepared before you move on. So if I move closer to the camera and my first finger and my bow is already prepared before I have to play. I'm kind of exaggerating to show, but if you're here and you have to play the next one, it's already too late. It's gonna make you out of tempo. So immediately, immediately. If that makes sense. So practice out of tempo, focus on the string crossing, and make sure that your left hand and your bow is on the right string before you play immediately. That would be a helpful tip. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, we'll give one final call for questions. If any of you out there
Mm-hmm.
have anything to ask, going once, going twice. Um, okay, and if you think of anything in the next like couple minutes after we all go our separate ways, you can always
Mm-hmm.
email us. So we're going to be
Sure.
emailing you guys, everyone in the audience. We're all going to be emailing you with some more information about lessons and things like that. And you can just email.
Sure.
We'll get you in touch with Miss An if you have any questions after the fact and you want to follow up. Um, and I know I learned a lot. I don't even play violin. So
Thank you.
thank you so much, Miss An. This was really awesome. And good luck to everybody out there on your audition.
Hmm.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
everybody.
Thank you for coming, and I hope you got something out of it. All right.
All right, you guys have a great week.